Happy Tuesday evening, everyone. Is it October or is it August? Well, feels like October, that is for sure. It's weather for Weather Geeks time, and the big weather story here locally, of course, over the last couple of days is how it just does not feel like August. It's a little more like late September, early October. We did 68 at the airport today after 67, our high yesterday, and actually that 67 yesterday occurred early in the morning. We spent most of the day kind of between 63 and 66. And so this cool weather we've had over the last few days has changed our number for August. We're now under a degree above average for the month, and that number will continue to be trimmed a little bit over the next couple of days, but I do think the last week of August is likely to be on the warm side, even hot early next week. So I think August is going to finish above the average temperature-wise, but not by a very big margin. It'll probably be our smallest margin of any of the summer months here in 2024. We told you there would be a little bit more in the way of sunshine today, and there was, but we did still have a fair amount of these cumulus and stratocumulus clouds in the sky today. This is a shot from the low-orbiting satellite capturing a beautiful landscape across eastern Ohio and western PA today. These cumulus and stratocumulus clouds tend to be some of our lower-based clouds. The base of these clouds can be just a handful of 1,000 feet above our heads, and especially stratocumulus, that's something we see a lot of times in the cool weather season. The cyclonic flow around low pressure oftentimes picks up moisture from the Great Lakes, and you see stratocumulus clouds all the time, late in fall, into the winter, and into early spring. Not as often in the summer season, but this is an unseasonably cool pattern, so stands to reason we would see some of those cooler season clouds. All right, so we're in solar autumn now. Of course, we're losing a lot of daylight per day, about 2.5 minutes per day. 8:13 our sunset this evening, but we're just over a week away from pre-8 p.m. sunsets by September 3rd after Labor Day weekend, 7:50. And then we're back to 7:39 in just 3 weeks coming up on September the 10th. So I mentioned we're in solar autumn, and officially we're at losing 2 minutes and 29 seconds of daylight per day. I still think it's a little more noticeable for most folks in the evening. Sunrises in the mornings are still around 6:30-ish, and for most folks, there's not a big difference between a 5:45 a.m. sunrise and a 6:30 a.m. sunrise. For some people there is, but for a lot of people there isn't. But in the evenings, now that we're, into the time of the year where it's getting pretty dark as early as 7:45, even though the official sunset's not for another half an hour perhaps, you notice it's getting pretty dark outside in the 7 o'clock hour, and that was not the case just a few weeks ago. And this cool weather recently has us thinking fall, and officially we have low fall foliage in Alaska. Now, a handful of trees here locally, depending on the tree type, already shedding some leaves and showing some color, but that's kind of the exception, of course, here in mid-August. Legitimate, though, fall foliage is occurring up in Alaska, and this begins the process that continues right down through Canada over the next month and into the western U.S. first, and then the rest of the U.S. as we head deeper into September and into October, of course. Now, speaking of the lower 48 states, not a whole lot going on this evening aside from a severe thunderstorm watch in Montana. Otherwise, not a lot happening across the lower 48 states. It is hot in many places, though. Not here locally, of course. We're actually one of the coolest spots in the country, but look at Texas frying under triple-digit heat, and the 80s and 90s extend up into that severe weather zone up in the northern plains and northern Rockies. All right, we had some holes in the clouds last night. We'll have more breaks in those clouds tonight, even though the moon was technically full yesterday, still almost full tonight. It'll be a better night to check out the full sturgeon moon. It's the first, I should say, of 4 consecutive supermoons that we will enjoy over the next 4 months. A supermoon, just a reminder, appears a little bit brighter, a little bit bigger in our skies, but just a little bit. To the naked eye, it's kind of hard to tell. But a supermoon is basically where a full moon coincides with the moon's closest approach to Earth in its orbit around our planet, which isn't a perfect circle. Sometimes it's a little closer, sometimes it's a little farther away. When the full moon occurs when it's closer, then you get a supermoon. All right, it's been about 9 weeks since we've seen temperatures as cool as we'll see Wednesday morning, and again Thursday morning as well. I think there's going to be widespread 40s to start the day. Some of the cooler spots at daybreak tomorrow morning and Thursday morning, some of the cooler sheltered valley locations, you might see a 45-degree reading. It may depend a little bit on cloud cover. I think there'll be better clearing tonight than there was last night. And I do think there will be some fair weather clouds in the mix tomorrow. Notice our low is still spinning up here over New England. We're still in kind of this cyclonic flow, but the air continues to dry out. The low continues to push a little farther away. So I think there'll be fewer clouds in the sky on Wednesday, but still there'll be some, and it still will be a pretty cool day by August standards. But then, after a clear and chilly start Thursday, what a beautiful afternoon Thursday, and wall-to-wall sunshine in our forecast for the end of the week on Friday. Not only will it turn hot, by the end of the weekend and early next week, it's going to turn kind of muggy as well, with dew points returning to the middle 60s. All right, let's talk about the longer range, since there's not going on a lot going on, I should say, in the short term. Let's speculate a little on September. I've been talking a little bit about September of late. I showed you the Climate Prediction Center forecast for September, I think, late last week, showing coast-to-coast warmth favored in September. But that's their initial kind of mid-month outlook. We'll see what they put out at the end of this month for the month of September. When I look back at past years that kind of looked similar to me, especially recent years, post-2000, say, that looked similar in the oceans, especially the Pacific Ocean, basically neutral conditions or a weak La Nina emerging, which is what we have going on right now. It's technically kind of ENSO neutral right now, but a weak La Nina appears to be coming. And coinciding with a negative, what we call PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation, that deals more with water temperatures in the northern Pacific, in years in which we had kind of a similar setup to what we have right now. Here's a look at September, and when you have this many years, the map kind of gets washed out a little bit. You don't see a lot of deep colors either way. But there is a pretty consistent signal for a warmer than average month across the Corn Belt. Good news for harvest season getting underway across, say, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, places like that. Also northern New England. For us, everything kind of washes out. There have been some cool Septembers. There have been some warmer ones. I would say the odds favor September here locally based on these analogs. Not being especially hot, maybe not being especially cool either, but not being anything to write home about in terms of high heat. Now, October, it's a little bit of a different signal. Those same years in October, there's a pretty strong signal for warmth across the northern tier of the country, including around here. All of this, of course, is compared to the average. And so I'm a little more confident that October will end up being warmer than the average than I am September. I mentioned in my recent September speculations, though, that you almost are daring the atmosphere to be cool in September in recent years. It's been a solid decade since we've been cool in the month of September compared to the average. Now, there is some model data to suggest that idea is the right one for September. Here's the latest run of the CFS Climate Forecast System modeling for September. And as always, we take all weather model information with a grain of salt, especially the longer range. But you can see the CFS is on board with the idea that a lot of places, not only, kind of in the southeast and the Ohio Valley, but even out into the Corn Belt, may have a cooler than average September. So this is a cooler looking map than the analog map I just showed you, but it does add to the narrative a little bit, or it adds some confidence in the idea that September, at least here locally, may not be particularly warm. In fact, the heat that we have coming early next week, with flirting with 90 a few times, that might just be the last hurrah for upper 80s to around 90 for this warm weather season in 2024. We'll have more updates on the longer range as long as the weather stays quiet in the short range. Future editions of Weather for Weather Geeks. Thanks for watching on this Tuesday evening. I'll see you right back here on Wednesday.